So, is a Bitcoin ETF coming this Friday on the 13th of October? That's what I want to talk about in this video because a lot of people are getting misconstrued as to what's going on in the Bitcoin ETF race that's happening. And it is a race. We've now got Fidelity posting a report yesterday basically saying Bitcoin's the best thing on earth in the digital asset space. And we've now got the deadline showing up. So what is this deadline? How does it work? What is it about? And what could potentially happen? That's what I want to just break down in this. Firstly, the Bitcoin ETF is extremely important, right? You know, you see me keep going on about it. There's a lot of Bitcoin content that doesn't go on about it. But in reality, in the world of finance, in the grand scheme outside of Bitcoin Twitter, the Bitcoin ETF is extremely important because it unlocks a flood of capital to come into the market. As the one of the managing directors, ex-managing directors at BlackRock pointed out in a conference in London, it could unlock up to $200 billion of capital within 3 years, which is insanity. That's more bullish than I am, which is, even shocking to me to read that, right? And so, what's about to happen to Bitcoin and what's about to happen to this ETF application. So let's talk a little bit about the history of it. Basically, Grayscale, which is GBTC, filed an application to convert GBTC into a spot ETF. It was denied, it was denied, it was denied. And then eventually they filed a lawsuit, and then all these other companies started coming in, BlackRock started coming in, et cetera, et cetera. And then they filed this lawsuit and won. The SEC got a smackdown by 3 judges in the U.S. And they've got a couple choices here. The first choice they've got is to yield to what the court says, and then ask for a little bit more time or whatever they want to do, but basically yield to what the court says. And then the next step, or the next option that they have, is to not listen to the courts, which they won't do. This is the U.S. we're talking about, the capital markets and the judicial system has to work together. They have to work together, and it is going to be it's going to work, basically, right? Everyone always has these conspiracies like, oh, what if this doesn't happen? What if that doesn't happen? What if Trump doesn't leave office? What if this, that, and the other? At the end of the day, America, the reason why American capital markets are what they are is because America has the best capital markets in the world. And the reason why you have the best capital markets in the world is because you know that when you have a difference of opinion, you can get judges to decide, and that actually gets executed. It's not just what somebody feels like on a particular day. The law is the law is the law. So GBTC basically won the lawsuit, and from that day, they had 45 days. The SEC had 45 days to basically decide what they were going to do regarding the ETF application for GBTC. At this point, what they did, right, is they basically extended the deadline for the other applications. And everyone on Twitter was going on about, oh my God, no more Bitcoin ETF for 2024, no more Bitcoin ETF for 2024, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a bunch of BS because they didn't respond to anything to do with GBTC, and GBTC is the biggest one there. GBTC is the signal. Everything else is the noise when it comes to ETF. So I want you to pay attention to that. It's extremely important. GBTC has over 650,000 Bitcoin within the fund, and it's easily, it's easily the most well positioned to convert into a spot ETF. So this is what I think is going to happen. That deadline, where the SEC basically gave the courts gave the SEC a smackdown, that expires on Friday. So on Friday, if the SEC has not replied to appeal, then the courts will be compelled to tell and instruct the SEC exactly what to do. So something is going to happen by Friday. Something between the SEC and the courts and GBTC is going to happen by Friday. What it doesn't mean is that if the SEC doesn't reply, it's an automatic conversion from the trust that it is into an ETF. It doesn't mean that. I want you to understand. It does not mean that. A lot of people are not understanding how the law works and trying to say that, if they don't reply, then it immediately gets converted into a spot ETF. That's not what happens. The other issue is they said, people say, there's no way that they're going to allow one without the others, and they've already pushed the others out. Sure, but this is a court order, which means that while they've pushed the others out, they can bring it forward. They can bring it forward. They can say, we've had all the issues solved, and we can bring it forward. So, I still am pretty hopeful, above 50%, that we're going to get a spot Bitcoin ETF in 2023. I think I might be the only one that's been saying it. At least there's a small club of us, if anything. A lot of people have accepted defeat and have basically said this is going to 2024, and it may go to 2024. But I think it makes most sense for BlackRock, for Fidelity, for all these other companies, for Grayscale themselves, to get this approved in 2023. Why? Because once you have a Bitcoin ETF, you now need to train salespeople. What a lot of people don't realize is when you're dealing in the money space, there is still sales involved. There's still people that need to call people and say, hey, we think this is a good idea. We think you should get some exposure into this asset. And so if you get an ETF approved in 2023, you have 4 months until the halving to actually get your salespeople trained up on the phones, calling people, telling them why they need to put some of that capital that might be in real estate, stocks, etc., bonds, whatever it is, into Bitcoin. Prepare that capital to come into Bitcoin as the ETF launches. So Friday is the deadline for the SEC to come up with a response to the smackdown that the court gave them. We'll see what happens. The very unique thing this time that's going on that I was reading from the Bloomberg intelligence guys, Eric and James, is that the SEC is now commenting and trying to reach out to the applicants of the spot ETF to try and get a resolution, which is extremely rare. Apparently, this has never ever been done in the history. And the Bloomberg intelligence guys in the ETF section are basically flabbergasted that the SEC is even doing this. So clearly the SEC has received the message. A spot Bitcoin ETF is coming. Whether it comes in 2023 or the very early part of 2024, I don't know. But if I had to place a bet, I'm saying 2023. We'll see whether I'm right or wrong. A lot of people were saying, hey, you were wrong about your Bitcoin ETF coming in 2023 video. No, morons. You need to understand how the law works. The GBTC is the signal. Everything else is noise. Stop listening to other, to the other applications. They're irrelevant. The only one that's important is the GBTC because it has the SEC against the ropes. This is the final round. It has the SEC's against the ropes, and the SEC has to decide what to do here. There's a couple paths they can take. All of the paths that they can take that do not lead to approval make the SEC look stupid. And the way that the judges gave them the smackdown, if I was the SEC, I wouldn't want to appeal this and go towards 17 judges. It wasn't like 2 judges said yes and 1 judge said no. It was 3 judges basically saying yes. In fact, if you read the legal response from the judges, you'll see that the judges basically say, this is a light translation, the judges basically say to the SEC, we have no clue how you came to this understanding around what you're saying based on everything else that you've approved in the Bitcoin space, including the futures ETFs. So the judges basically gave them the Royal Rumble smackdown, and now the SEC has to decide what to do. Do they want to save face? Or do they want to try their luck with 17 judges, right? So though I think that the worst thing that can happen here is that they ask for 30 more days, 60 more days, 90 more days, and the court grants it. But I think GBTC has the single highest chance of getting approved in 2023. We have a spot Bitcoin ETF in 2023, and we start unlocking that $200 billion of capital that's going to come into Bitcoin after we get the spot Bitcoin ETF. There is a lot of misconceptions about what an ETF can do and whether you can price manipulate and all this other stuff, and I've done videos on that to show you, to demonstrate, why that's not the case and why a market getting bigger reduces a bunch of the manipulation that can be possible, right? You want more transparent markets, you want more capital coming in to reduce the fraud that happens in the market. So I just wanted to let you know, Friday the 13th is the deadline for the SEC to respond to the court smackdown. You need to keep an eye on that. If you haven't been keeping an eye on it, now is the time to focus on that, because if you're not focused on that, you're not going to be up to date when Bitcoin starts to move. There is a movement coming for Bitcoin. It is, we've spent too much time here. You got the 10-year yields collapsing at this point. You got a war breaking out in Israel, between Israel and Palestine. You've got the Ukraine-Russia war still going on, etc., etc. You got a presidential election coming up, and now is the time for an ETF to be approved. Another director, ex-director of BlackRock, basically said, I give them 3 to 6 months and they will approve a spot Bitcoin ETF. It's just, now is the time, and so you need to get focused, because what happens when this happens, remember, the top 500 asset managers in the world control $130 trillion of capital. So what's $200 billion of that? Nothing. And $200 billion going into Bitcoin in a short period of time, let's work out what that is, right? Let's have a look here. $200 billion going into Bitcoin based on the Bank of America bull market multiple. That's what I want to look at, right? $200 billion going into it gives you a $23.6 trillion market cap, right? And a $23.6 trillion market cap means a Bitcoin price of $1.1 million per coin. Just from the ETF, not including all the other demands. So time is running out. I keep saying this on podcasts and things like that. Time is running out. You need to get serious if you're not close to one Bitcoin yet. I think you have until the end of 2023. Get serious, get focused, and ultimately remember that there are still only 3 rules to Bitcoin. Step number 1, you buy Bitcoin. Step number 2, shut the fuck up. And step number 3, you get fabulously wealthy.